The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on Reality Radio 101. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you here again today. I just finished a 2-hour yoga class, and that is the topic of this show today is finding the courage to truly be yourself. And I would say probably when I was 16 years old and maybe not going in the best path in life, somewhere along the line, I stumbled upon yoga. And I swear to you, it was a life-defining experience because, like I said, I was probably not going in the best direction at the time at 16. But then again, at 16, it's pretty hard to be going in the right direction unless you've got a lot of good guidance. But what I found was it aligned so well with me feeling right within inside of myself that it seemed to tune me in a certain direction that really felt clear and clean within inside of myself. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting everybody should do yoga. However, I really am fond of yoga. But what I am fond of is people recognizing that we not only have the ability, but we have a built-in instinct that helps align us with what is right for you. And today's show is really going to be finding the courage to truly be yourself. We are so lucky to have Dr. Lyndsay Gibson back again. We're going to talk about two of her books. We actually had her on the show talking about a previous book about emotionally immature parents. So today's book that we're going to focus on is Who You Were Meant to Be, a guide to finding or recovering your life's purpose. But I think it's also really important to talk a little bit about the other book, Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents, Practical Tools to Establish Boundaries and Reclaim Your Emotional Autonomy, because I think these things are really related. I think it is very, very difficult for us to become who you really are meant to be when you come from a background where you have emotionally immature parents, or kind of things that build up blocks to you being who you're supposed to be or who you could be, or what brings you joy even when you're living in an environment which is not really conducive to that. And, for sure, emotionally immature parents will not create an environment that is helpful in that direction. So welcome back, Dr. Gibson. Thank you again for joining us today.
Hi, Anna. It's wonderful to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great. I am delighted to read the Who You Were Meant to Be book. And I know that there must be a ton of backstory that goes along with who you were meant to be and the inspiration for it. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And remember, I'm also going to invite listeners to write in their thoughts, their experiences, questions you might have at reality radio 101 at gmail.com. No,
I'd like to
that's
correct
not the
you.
right
Right.
one.
It's in studio 101 at gmail.com. Yes.
Thank you, Gary. In studio 101 at gmail.com. Now, that is so funny. Like I said, I just did a 2-hour yoga class, and I think it's like I'm still upside down a little bit. So thank you, Gary, for stepping in, our fabulous producer, once again, helping. So, Lyndsay, maybe you could explain a little bit of that to us with the idea that people may write in and ask questions, give comments, share their own experience at instudio101 at gmail.com.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to those questions. As far as how the book came to me, and that incidentally is really the right way to describe it, because it wasn't like I sat down and thought, gee, what do I want to do next? And then thought out a path that included this book. It happened when I was sitting on the edge of my bed in the morning, and the title came to me, Who You Were Meant to Be. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to help people with that. And then my next thought was a group of people who got together who were trying to discover with each other who they were meant to be. And so the idea for the came, and then along with it, in order to structure the group, the idea for making this into a book came. So it was very much an example of what I talk about in the book, which is we get to know ourselves and our purpose through this still small voice inside that knows kind of what our intended path is. And it just gives us these little messages like that, but it comes with a lot of energy to it. And we can recognize these signs and find the things that are really connecting up with our true self. So this book came to me as a connection with my true self, and something that's been providing a deep sense of purpose for me for, like over 30 years now.
Wow. Okay. That's really something. So let's talk about this sitting on the edge of your bed and something really authentic comes to the surface. And the truth about what's likely to happen for most people is that really true thing that pops up. I mean, for you, you've obviously done enough inner work that you allowed that to land fully. But where I see things going in a lot of cases is that the true thoughts and voice comes to the surface, and then somebody takes a mallet and smashes it down because it's too scary.
Yes, that's exactly what happens.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a line from an old song. I think it's I Shot the Sheriff. And the line goes something like, every time I planted a seed, he said, stop it before it grows, or stomp it before it grows. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to join, sort of the effort against, is that spirit of squashing down the impulses that are really coming from the true self, trying to let us know what our life purpose is about. Yeah, so it's very hard when you have emotionally immature parents. It's very hard for you to actualize your true self, because so much of your emotional energy goes toward taking care of or paying attention to what that emotionally immature parent wants or thinks. So if you have an inspiration, like the example that I gave, you will immediately, if you had these kinds of parents, you will immediately run it through a filter of what would somebody else think about this idea, or how would this affect someone else? And that conditioning comes from the emotionally immature parents' need to have their children kind of attend to them and their emotional vulnerabilities. So it makes it hard for people who come from that kind of background to have, yeah, like you said, like an authentic message that comes through and sticks around long enough to guide us, because we have been really taught and trained to keep our attention on the wants and needs of other people.
Right. Otherwise, it feels like, how are you going to survive that conversation or interaction or the fallout from doing what you really want to do? Like, I was just telling Gary, our wonderful producer, that I was taking singing lessons, and singing is very hard. I mean, staying on tune and, holding the rhythm and knowing the beat and not going offside with your, whatever it is. But it's so much fun. And, if I spent a lot of time thinking about what other people might be thinking of it, oh my goodness, she can't sing, she's out of tune, whatever it is, doesn't matter. I wouldn't have any joy in doing the thing. So the tricky thing, I think, is allowing yourself to get connected with the joy as a more important part than the what will the other person say, because there's this cost to following our joy and inspiration. And what happens when you've lived a life where there's this cost to following your joys and inspirations? I love the way you put it. It is exactly what I was thinking. This inspiration is filtered through what someone else would think about it. Like, I think I really want our listeners to really hear your words. I wrote them down because I thought they were really very precise and clear. Inspiration filtered through what someone else thinks about that thing that you want to do, or that is inspiring you. So if you're sitting on the edge of your bed and you get an inspiration like Lyndsay did, to write who you were meant to be, and you're longing to really bring that forward. How many of you out there, dear listeners, have this experience where you have these momentary impulses and it's absolutely correct for you, but then you hit a brick wall because you're thinking, the next thing you think is, oh, what would mom think about that? What would my uncle think? What would my cousin think? What would my best friend think? Would they, how would they react to that? Is there going to be a price to pay for me doing this thing that I love?
Yeah. That's exactly how it goes. And it's, when the way that you describe that, Anna, is so poignant, because I think everybody can appreciate that is what goes through our minds if we have been sensitized to other people's opinions. And, we get sensitized to other people's opinions, not because, we're spineless, or we're some kind of people pleasers or anything self-derogatory like that. We get sensitized because a lot of emotionally immature people are also very dominant and very forceful personalities that insist on reality being structured around what they approve of, what they think is right, what they're comfortable with. And so it's no wonder that our first thought is, what are they going to think about it? Because emotionally immature people can make life so unpleasant for you if they don't agree or don't approve of what you're doing. So yeah, it's I love the way that you played that out, because it will encourage, I hope, all your listeners to catch themselves in that act of being dominated in their own minds by forceful personalities that really kind of rule through criticism and judgment. And they succeed in that as long as we don't know that that's what they're doing. But as soon as you realize that they are making judgments and opinions based on something that they like, when we start to realize that's what's happening, then we have the option of setting that aside and going back to focus on what we feel.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably most people at least have a couple of people in their lives, whether they're peripheral or they're central, who have dominant personalities or emotional immaturity, whether a parent or somebody other. But, because it's hard to navigate this world without encountering somebody who believes that they have rights over your life and decisions, clearly not having rights, but feeling that they do somehow. So let's talk this through for a moment. Let's say I have an emotionally dominant and immature person in my life, and there's this thing I want to do, and I know it's going to piss off that person. They're either going to be jealous, or they're going to be angry, or they're going to be hurt, or whatever it is. And I think to myself, because I think this would be a totally typical inner thought, I would rather not do that thing, my heart's desire, than pay the price of dealing with that person's reaction.
Absolutely. Yes. That's what I meant by they can make life so unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all happening at a deep emotional level, at the level of reaction and our autonomic nervous system that does fight, flight, or freeze. I mean, these kinds of interactions can be so automatic, so deep in our nervous system that we're unaware of what we are flinching away from, or how we shut ourselves down in order not to get that zap of criticism or unpleasantness. Yeah, so becoming aware of that, of the effect on us, is really your way out of that.
Okay, so there is awareness, and that is very useful, because we can then say, wait a minute, this is my heart's desire, and I know they're going to be upset or angry or jealous or vindictive or whatever it is. And I can think about it and weigh out the costs and the benefits. Now, my concern is that a lot of people, in the end, choose to not do the heart's desire. So let's dig a little deeper into that, Lyndsay, because I know that you work with this all the time, and you're seeing this. We'll talk about your growth group in a minute, but you're seeing this unfold in many different ways with your individual clients, but also with the growth group that you ran.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most of the time when people bring this up in therapy, or if they come to something like the growth group that I ran a while back, when this comes up for them, it'll be when there is a very strong interest, something that really pulls at them that they want to do, and they are in conflict over that, so that they're being pulled between what they want to do and their conscious and subconscious fears of what will happen if they act on that. So that sets up an internal conflict. And that's usually what they come to therapy with, or coaching, or a growth group, is they come because they want to actualize their dreams. But the first thing that they're going to talk about is all the reasons why they couldn't possibly do this. That's been my experience over and over again, that people don't come in and talk about how great it would be to do this and what they're so excited about. They come in and tell you what it is, but then they'll say, oh, I'm too old, or I've got too many responsibilities, or I'll never make enough money to justify the education for. I mean, a million things that they focus on. And really, all the time in the therapy session or in their time in the group could be spent on them building the case about why they can't do it. So one of the things that we did in the growth group was we had it structured basically on the same structure that is in the book, where we had topics each week, and it kept us on track to make us focus on the things that we needed to become aware of in order to kind of dismantle that fear of doing the thing that we felt meant to do. And it also gave us courage and insight to look for those signs of what our true self wants to do with our life. But it was always fascinating to me how the preponderance of their energy was going to maintaining the argument that they couldn't do it. And that to me is tragic. I'm all about helping people to see what they're doing to themselves at this point, because they have internalized these critical views of other people, and now they're bringing them to bear against themselves. Again, once you get that idea that, oh, I'm creating this fear, I'm creating this sense of impossibility inside myself now, then again, you have that opportunity to take that apart and begin to try out some of the things that you want to do, and to have more courage about it. You're not quite as afraid when the boogeyman is exposed as an internalization of these other people's ideas and objections.
Yeah, it's usually less of a disaster for us to not do the thing that is our heart's desire than to face the pettiness or the jealousy of the immature person.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, and that takes a huge amount of courage. Now, going back to your growth group, I was going to ask you, did the growth group occur organically? Like, did it come? Tell us a little bit about how the growth group came together, what the mandate was, how long it ran, and the discoveries. And I'd like to, maybe if you could tell us about some of the weekly focused topics, because I think that would be really interesting. And maybe people in the community who are listening today might be able to figure out a way to create a local growth group for themselves too.
Yes, it would not be hard to do. And I would just like to encourage people to keep in mind what I was just talking about, which is be very easy for any group like this to deteriorate into sitting around talking about why we can't do it. So that's like the number one caution that everybody has to keep in mind if they start a group like this, is that it is fine to work through our fears and our worries about what will happen if we do some of these things. But when it starts becoming repetitious and it starts becoming the focus of each group's session, then you have to be able to move it on. So that's why when I did the group, and I did these groups over a series of months. I was in a small private practice with some other clinicians, and they would refer their clients, and I would refer some of mine to these groups. There were anywhere from 5 to 8 people in the groups. And we would go through a set number of sessions, which were probably around 8 to 10 sessions. So some of the things that that we did was we started out talking about what we wanted to do, what people's ideas were, and then what they felt were holding them back, because you have to get a picture of that. I mean, I was talking about not repeating that and repeating it and repeating it, but you do have to kind of know the forces within yourself that are working against you finding your purpose. So that's very important to have people nail down in the beginning of the group, is what you want to do, and then why you're afraid of doing it, or why you're convinced that it couldn't possibly be done. And I had people take notes. Journaling is an important part of this process, because you won't remember how you saw things unless you write it down. And one of the ways that we maintain our motivation is by seeing our progress. And so when you can flip back in your journal and see that, I used to be terrified of what my aunt would think of this, that's encouraging, because maybe you have worked through that. Maybe that's something that you have moved past. So we want to be able to see our progress over the period of time. But some of the things that we would focus on would be what they want, what was holding them back. Were we looking for permission instead of just going ahead and doing what we want to do? And if so, who did we feel like we needed permission from? Then we looked at these kind of forces within ourselves, which generally speaking, I called the ego. It just means the part of the personality that really doesn't want you to leave home, leave your hometown, become an individual. It wants you to remain a member of the tribe. It wants you to stay safe. It wants you to not try anything new. That's what I just called the ego. And we talked about that enemy within that keeps you from thinking that you can go ahead and do the things that you feel driven to do. Identifying the kinds of things that the ego is likely to say to you, that's very important, because the ego is really such a trickster. I mean, it will shapeshift and tell you whatever it needs to tell you to discourage you from doing what you want to do, even sometimes in the guise of being helpful. Like one time, one of the women in the group told about how she wanted to do stained glass one afternoon during the week after work. And so she thought, that would be great. I just got this great idea for this project. I'm going to start on it right now. And then the ego voice said, it's 5:30. It's kind of late. Why don't we wait and do this on Sunday afternoon when we have lots of time and we can spread everything out, and it'll be so much easier and so much more fun. So she thought, well, I can't argue with that. So she put it off. And by the time Sunday afternoon came, that inspiration, that idea she had was not there anymore. She didn't feel like doing stained glass. She felt like doing the stained glass that night, that week. Okay. So that's an example of how that ego voice will tell us whatever it is that works to throw us off the pursuit of what we really want to do.
I love the idea of claiming joy now, so that we're not having these moments where it's like, yeah, I'd really like to, whatever it is that is your heart's desire, stained glass or, singing or, whatever. And instead of this delay, like, oh, I'll put it off. It's fine. I'll do it later. Claim joy now. Like, just, and again, I'm going to really appeal to the listeners, what would life look like if you were letting yourself claim joy now? Now, I'm not suggesting that, you got to go to work and, instead you're going to blow it off. You're going to get fired and, the heck with it all. No, I'm saying there are these crystal moments where you get these beautiful inspirations, and you have the 20 minutes or the 2 hours or whatever it takes. Yes, say yes. And claim joy now. Like what would it be like to just, even if it's just a sip of joy, it doesn't even have to be a whole bottle of joy. It can just be a sip of joy, and allowing yourself just that little sip, and feel into that, and notice what happens to you as you contemplate actually saying yes to those tiny moments, because those tiny moments can be incredibly nourishing. And this is your time, so this is your time. Do it. Say yes. I want to kind of go back again, and now take a few moments and read some of our wonderful listeners' comments, and hear what people are saying. Okay, so this one is from Frank. Hi, Frank. Hello, Dr. Baranowski. Thank you very much for having Dr. Gibson on your radio show again. I really looked forward to this show. Thank you again. Well, thank you, Frank, for joining us again. You're right. Lyndsay is offering some insight into really, really important things. And I'm just going to mention that Dr. Gibson has a new website for people who are looking for information about her work or her books. And the new website is Lyndsay Gibson Psychologist.com. And I'll spell it out. It's LINDSAYGIBSONPSYD.com. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get our team to update our links on the back end, so it's easy for you to find as well. And you can find her books, Who You Were Meant to Be, A Guide to Finding or Recovering Your Life's Purpose, and the other one that I have in front of me, which is Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents, Practical Tools to Establish Boundaries and Reclaim Your Emotional Autonomy. And I love that, establishing boundaries, because a lot of the things we're talking about today are impossible to achieve without establishing really great boundaries. Let's just talk about that before I read a little bit more of our listeners' comments. Lyndsay, can you talk to us a little bit about establishing better boundaries in your life and the importance of that?
Yes. We have two, I would call them almost twin developmental drives as human beings. One is we absolutely need that emotional connection and bonding with other people in order to, develop our personalities, but also to develop our inner structure as psychological beings. You have to be in a dependent relationship with someone who is taking good enough care of you that you have a sense of yourself as a person who can be in a relationship with someone. And then there's another drive, which is the need to individuate from that, meaning that, yes, we definitely need that grounding in a dependent, trusting relationship with someone early in life. But pretty soon, we're going to start feeling our oats and wanting to become more of an individual. And that drive to individuate, to differentiate ourselves from these early relationships and from other people, that's an essential part of building a sense of self, of becoming an individual person who will ultimately be able to go out in the world and cope and succeed and run their own family. So both of those things are very important. You can't maintain your individuality without adequate boundaries with other people, because the sense of self the sense of individuality necessitates that you be able to say, this is me and that's you, or this is what I want to do, that's what you want to do. They're different. We can talk about how to collaborate and work that out, but I'm me and you're you. That's the basic element of setting boundaries. What emotionally immature people like to do is they like to say, oh, you're just like me. And I know what would be best for you because I know what would be best for me. So let me just tell you who to be, and let me just come over your boundaries and fix this up for you. So lots of times it's critically important for us to be able to feel that place where our individuality needs some more room. And we need to be able to say, in effect, yeah, I can't do that, or I don't want you to do that because that's not comfortable for me, or that's not in alignment with what I need to do, or that doesn't suit what I enjoy. So I can't go along with that. There are all kinds of boundaries that we have to set up just in order to be our own individual person. And when we let people get away with coming across our boundaries, well, for one thing, it can cause anger. We don't like it when other people kind of push us around or make assumptions about us. So that can be a problem. But it just if you let that kind of thing go on, you end up very confused, and it's harder to tell the difference between what you want to do and what somebody else expects from you. So boundaries are incredibly important to keep all of that straight and to kind of train people around us about how we like to be treated and how we expect them to really respect who we are, who might be very different from them.
Yeah, we can only connect with our true self. And I like what you wrote in the book, about pleasurable correctness. This is on page 43. Are we having fun yet? And you write, at the beginning of our lives, we get our start using pleasure and pain to define who we are. If it feels good, it is me. If it hurts, it's not me. Pleasure and pain build our self-concept and continue throughout our lives. However, as children, we can be made ashamed of what we like to do, resulting in desperate inner attempts to change what we cannot change. Part of this is simply socialization, but when socialization goes overboard, we can reject our true natures to the point where we can no longer tell what we enjoy. If we don't know what we enjoy, we don't know who we are. Pleasure is a funny thing in our culture. Our pleasures are very keenly observed, defined, and evaluated. If you ask yourself what really brings you pleasure, you may be surprised. Try to be totally honest and open when you answer this question. If you're given free rein and no one disapproves of you, what would you do that brings you the most pleasure? And it's interesting because this whole idea is that, you're just not gonna, it's just not gonna feel pleasurable if it's not pleasurable. You got to do you. And that's going to be really, really unique to you. And if you feel that somebody's encroaching on your boundaries, it may become very difficult for you to have a really good sense of what is actually pleasurable, or even allowing yourself to feel that pleasure if somehow even feeling pleasure was an unacceptable option for you in your life and your world. So, this shows a little bit about how boundaries and pleasure, or lack of pleasure restriction, can be intertwined. Here's another one. This one is from Monique. Hello, Monique. Thank you for writing in. It says, hello, doctors. What about adult parents of emotionally immature children? My two sons are in their late 20s, still live at home, have no job, play video games all day. How about a book on that? What do you think, Lyndsay?
I get so many good ideas for other books. You can't believe it. Now that's kind of a different focus than where my other books have gone to. However, I do have a book that's coming out July 1st, and there is a chapter in there about what about when your adult child is emotionally immature? How do you handle that? So there is a chapter in that new book that's coming out that addresses that. But that's about as close as I've gotten to that so far.
Yeah, and there are books and resources on young adults' failure to thrive, and just kind of doing some contemplation about how that comes about and the level of let's say comfort, Monique, that you may have created for your two adult sons who are in their late 20s, still living at home, no job, playing video games. Their lives must be very comfortable. So, questions about how that could have happened and where their motivations went to, those are all really, really important things. So I would really encourage you to start reading a little bit about the literature on failure to thrive, because, there is literature on it, and there may be experts in your area who work with young adults who have this particular issue around being unable to thrive in the world as adults. So it is a hugely important topic for sure. And this one is from Bob. And oh my goodness, this is so funny. Dr. Baranowski, are you selling tickets yet to your recital at Carnegie Hall? Can't wait. Love your radio show. Oh my God, Bob, you are so funny. I love it. Well, I have to be honest. I think I am not yet consistently holding a tune in honest self-reflection, although I'm finding it really joyful. And it's so super fun to sing with my singing coach. She's such a good singer and such a great teacher that it makes me feel like I can sing, and it feels good to sing. So I'm not going to stop. But being realistic, I think I'm going to wait a little bit for Carnegie Hall. However, I just love that you wrote that in. So thank you very much for that.
Incidentally,
go
I
ahead.
just put there. Yeah. No, but that's the kind of thinking that really gives us fuel. Just the thought of where you would like to get to, and someone who sees your potential and plays with you in that space in your your mind, your dream world, where this would be the sort of the ultimate extension of who you would like to be. And you can't put any limits on that, because like we say, Carnegie Hall, like, oh, I'll never get to Carnegie Hall. But no, it's not about Carnegie Hall. It's about the energy that gets stirred up when you think about Carnegie Hall.
Well, it's funny because, I would never actually think about anything like that. Although I'm really excited that Bob thought it, it's like, because it's super funny to me. But the thing that I recognize in doing something that I'm not very skilled at is the joy in just practicing at the level that I am at and letting that be purely its own pleasure without it needing to be more. And I think as soon as I take off the need for it to be something, I can just enjoy it in its simplicity. And I think, we're so oriented towards our goals in general in our culture. or in certain levels of success that we've lost sight of just the joy of playing or the joy of doing something because it feels very delightful to us. And we're not going to get anything from it except for this delightful feeling. Mm-hmm. So, really my, dear listeners, like contemplate that, the no goal joy, the thing that is nourishing because in its own essence, just doing it gives you an uplift, and just allow that to be enough so that you can find these little gems in your life. Okay, here's another. This one's from Donna. Hello, where can I go? Where can I get the new book by Dr. Lyndsay Gibson? Well, do you want to talk about that, Lyndsay?
Yeah, it's available for pre-order now on Amazon. It's called Disentangling from Emotionally Immature People. It'll be available on July 1st, but there are places on Amazon to do pre-order. So that will be easy to get. And it's a kind of a interesting format of a book because it's 50 short little chapters that are organized under the most common questions that I've gotten on the topic of emotionally immature people and problems in relationships with them. So you can kind of use it as a handbook. It has an index, which a lot of self-help books don't have, so that you can go to the index or the table of contents, look up what your interest is that day, and then read that short chapter on that topic. And then there are exercises, written exercises at the end of each chapter with some tips and strategies as well. So it's a very practical book, and I hope that people will like the new format.
That sounds great. I will just reference goodreads.com for our listeners. I often, when I'm suggesting a book to, clients or listeners or whatever, I like to reference Goodreads because it's an independent review website. And by the way, Lyndsay, if you go to goodreads.com and you just type in your name, there'll be a whole list of the books that you've published, including Disentangling from Emotionally Immature People, Avoid Emotional Traps, Stand Up for Yourself, and Transform Your Relationships as an Adult Child of Emotionally Immature Parents. I have a question for you on that topic. Do you think that it is common or more common for people who come from or grow up in homes with emotionally immature parents to find themselves entangled in relationships with emotionally immature people, or to find themselves struggling with the impact of those people in their lives? Because I think emotionally immature people are, wherever you are, there are some emotionally immature people. It's only when we have entanglements that make it difficult.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think there is a tendency, if you grew up with parents like this, there is a tendency to feel very comfortable at first with other emotionally immature people, because you can just sort of slide back into the role that you had with your parents or other family members with this new person, and it feels like home. I mean, familiarity is one of the basic elements of bonding. We bond to what is familiar to us in some way. When we grow up with emotionally immature parents, we structure ourselves. I mean, this is unconscious. It's involuntary. It's automatic. We structure ourselves around the atmosphere and the people that we grew up with. That becomes our skill set, so to speak. So lots of times, what I would see would be someone would come to see me for therapy on the tail end of their first marriage. So they would have married that person who was kind of like allowed them to continue their family dynamics, so to speak. And then my client would have started to grow psychologically and would begin to feel uncomfortable or would begin to expect more from the relationship than that emotionally immature person could give. And then they would find that they felt very incompatible with them at that point, because they didn't put it this way, but I certainly saw it this way. They had grown and become more complex, more individuated as a person. And now the domination or the self-centeredness of the emotionally immature person was a lot harder to take.
Yeah, growth is not optimal for the survival of unhealthy relationships. So do please keep that in mind, because, if you're in a growth trajectory, you may just find that some people in your life, if they're not also growing, may slip out of the range of relationship with you, because it's no longer sustainable. I mean, if what you've done is spent years compensating for somebody else's bad behavior, and then you are really doing a lot of internal work, you're kind of really coming to accept yourself, you're wanting to do the things that increase your joy, you're doing simple things that make you feel truly aligned with yourself, some of the people in your life will not tolerate that well. They're going to be busy trying to get you to go back into modes of suppression or fawning towards them, and it makes it very, very hard to sustain relationships like that. You will end up disentangling yourself, as Dr. Lyndsay Gibson is sharing with us today, from emotionally immature people in general. And that can be really problematic, especially if in your life you've actually surrounded yourself with people who fit what you're familiar with, not necessarily what is healthy, but what you're familiar with. And now you're in a new place and you're starting to grow. You're really growing up and growing into yourself, and you start to attract new people, new activities, new interests. And maybe, your heart has expanded and you're feeling pretty good about life. Growth is not optimal for survival of unhealthy relationships. What do you think?
I think that's very true, because when we begin to differentiate into our own individuality, there's a family therapist, Murray Bowen, who came up with this, what he called the differentiation scale. And what it is it's a scale that has characteristics of how people function at different levels of individuality. So what he thought, and I think I've seen this borne out many times in my work, what he thought was that even people who are just a few places away on that differentiation scale, lots of times really don't enjoy each other's company. There's a feeling of a clash, or there's a feeling of discomfort. There's a feeling of not having anything in common. You don't find the same things funny. You don't seem to have the same needs. You don't have the same level of empathy. It makes it kind of awkward to get along with them, even if it's not a glaring difference in the level of emotional maturity. But even a little bit can make it hard to form that good relationship. So when people begin to grow psychologically, and they kind of are moving along that scale toward, more complexity, more individuation, even a little bit of growth, it can very easily make that old relationship. It can make the problems in that old relationship real evident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it's a bit tough if you tend toward being highly loyal and you've got people in your life who maybe haven't been growing in the way that you have been growing and moving on or setting better boundaries. And you don't necessarily have to kind of make any declarations and kick people out of your life, but you may be working on some improvements around your boundaries. I want to go back for a minute around improving boundaries. Now, the differentiation scale is super interesting, but it brings me right back to this idea of boundaries. And do you have some suggestions to our listeners today about setting up boundaries, like some nice strategies to do that may be helpful and things that people can accommodate?
Yeah, the first step in that is for you to know what it is that you're really comfortable and uncomfortable with. Part of the problem that a lot of people have with boundaries is that they haven't really thought through what it is that they're willing to put up with and what they really don't like. And again, it can be hard to come up with that because they're so accustomed to thinking about how the other person feels about it and following that course, so that there's no conflict. So the first rule is you have to decide what you really do and don't like in an interaction with somebody, and make sure that you're clear within yourself. That's the first step. Then when you tell the other person, I always encourage people to do it in their own style. For instance, if you are a person who tends to be, very sweet and nice and quiet and, not an assertive, aggressive personality at all, then do it in that style. Do it any way that you can. You bring up the subject. You can be as nice, as polite, as considerate as you want to be, but you still get the point across that this is something that I would like you not to do, or this is something that I'm no longer comfortable with. For instance, I had a client whose mother used to just walk in her house anytime she wanted to. And that had been such a pattern and such a habit that it was very hard for this woman to, get straight in her own mind that she really didn't like that. Once she did, she started locking her door. And then she and her mother had a discussion, a heated discussion, because the mother was very upset about this, about how she wanted to have her own home. So it doesn't matter whether or not you are an assertive, aggressive, stand up for yourself kind of personality. You can do it any way that works for you. And for this client of mine, it was locking the door. She felt that it was easier to do it that way and then talk to her mother about it than it would be to bring it up in the first place. That's fine. It doesn't matter how you get there. So you can be comfortable, bring it up in any way you feel comfortable. And then you want to be sure that you repeat it as often as needed. That is something that often kind of flummoxes people, where they set the boundary, the other person doesn't observe it, and then they're kind of stunned. They're like, well, wait a minute, I tried, but they're not obeying me, or they're not doing what I want. That's because you're repeating it.
Exactly. And that is a really good kind of realization that just because you set that boundary doesn't mean it's going to be crystal clear to the other person, because they have benefited so much for the soft boundary. I want to just wrap things up because we've got 1 minute left. Lyndsay, thank you so much for joining us. I want to again remind people of this great book, Who You Were Meant to Be, Lyndsay Gibson, and Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents, the Goodreads website, where you can look up all of Lyndsay's books and see the really great reviews on her books. And I'm just going to make reference to one more thing, which is Appendix A, Is This the Right Direction for Me? In your book, Who You Were Meant to Be, was to ask some very good questions about, what do you really want? What is your real motivator? So I would really encourage people, if they are interested, to pick up a copy of the book. I want to thank you again, Lyndsay, and hopefully we'll have you back on for your disengaging book, because I just love that topic, and it's always a pleasure to have you on. So thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Enjoy your day, everybody. Be well, be kind to yourself. And I'm signing off again. Bear Psychology Radio. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with your host, Dr. Anna Baranowski, right here on Reality Radio 101.